'Tis the season for developer conferences, and we can't get enough of them, or can we? I'm here with Mary Jo Foley, who is going to be at Microsoft Build next week, and we were just talking about developer conferences and do they know their target audience? Hi, Mary Jo. Welcome thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Larry.
So, F8 just happened, and I've heard a bunch of privacy stuff, and I haven't heard of much for developers. We got Build next week, we got Google I/O coming up, and then we got Apple WWDC coming down the pike too. Mm-hmm. So I guess, what's your take on this development? Have the developer conferences lost the plot?
I think they kind of have. I'm thinking about Build for the last couple of years that I've gone to it, and Build is Microsoft's premier developer conference. That's how they describe it. That's how they market it. And developers come to it, usually like 5,000 developers come. But I feel like developers who come to Build are expecting to hear about what's going on with Windows and .NET and Win32, the technologies that they use every day to develop apps. If you look at the Build session catalog, there are sessions on those things, but there aren't a lot of them. And in the keynotes, I don't even think we'll hear anybody talk about Win32 or .NET. That's what developers who come want to hear.
Yeah, the keynotes have almost become more corporate statements. They're almost more like press events, really, right? So totally. You look at F8, they basically changed the app around a bit, right? But that was more for the consumer, not necessarily the developer. And Google kind of sticks to the plot a bit because they have Android and all that, but that often turns into a vision statement on AI and where they want to go with assistant technology and stuff like that. So do you think there'll be pushback from developers, I guess, is a big question.
What I heard anecdotally was last year, developers came to Microsoft after Build and they said, guys, we need more Windows sessions at this thing. I know you don't want to talk about Microsoft as a Windows company anymore, but we're developing apps. We're using Windows. We're developing maybe not on Windows, but we're developing for Windows, the desktop platform. And we need to have sessions to help us see where you're going with that whole vision. So I think this year there will be more of those kinds of sessions. But I think Microsoft's overall overarching message on this stuff is intelligent cloud, intelligent edge. And Windows, yeah, they're in there too, as part of the edge thing. But I think developers are hoping and wishing for something other than what they're going to hear.
Yeah, I think developers overall, they want like real code, real toys to play with.
Right.
And I also think they need to split these conferences up.
Agree. I so agree.
Cloud developer is different from a Windows developer, different from a AI developer.
Yes. And, Microsoft's trying to do things like add Windows machine learning to the Windows platform, having AI tools available to Windows developers, getting them to think about using Azure, some of the things like cognitive services in Azure, the machine learning services in Azure when they're writing their apps. But I think the old days where there would be a keynote at Build where they made jokes about angle brackets and everyone laughed, I think people miss those days.
Right. Well, it may also be that more C-level types are going to these things instead of developers.
Maybe. I'd be curious to know that because I feel like the message, and part of it is because, it's broadcast, it's streamed live, people are tweeting about it. So the companies look at these things more as this is our chance to pitch our all up cross-company message. Then they look at it as here's our message for developers.
Yeah. And the weird thing there, though, is if you lose the developers, you kind of lose all your mojo anyway.
Kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the cure for these things is just to break them up. I mean, and Google's a great example, right? They talk about TensorFlow, Android, cloud. They cover a lot of turf. That's almost too much turf.
It is. I think the old days of developers needs to come back.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Mary Jo.
Thanks, Larry.